At a crowded train station during morning rush hour, a young resident doctor was hurrying to an important scholarship interview. Suddenly, she spotted an elderly man in a wheelchair stuck between the tracks, just as a train barreled toward him. Amid the crowd that only stood watching, with no one daring to step forward, she rushed out without hesitation to save him, risking her life and her own future. What she didn't know was that the man she saved was a powerful figure, and that moment of bravery would open a door to change her life forever. Before we begin, please let us know where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel because tomorrow I have something special for you. The digital clock above the turnstile reads 7:45. Emily Brooks pushed through the metal gate with her shoulder, her hospital badge still clipped to her wrinkled scrubs. 36 hours. That's how long she'd been awake. The fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai's emergency room still burned behind her eyelids every time she blinked. She moved through the crowd at Times Square station like water finding cracks in stone. Her sneakers made soft squeaking sounds against the grimy tile. Around her, the morning rush pressed forward in waves, suits, briefcases, coffee cups, blank faces staring at phones. Nobody looked at anyone. Nobody spoke, just the shuffle of feet and the distant rumble of trains below. Emily's hand went to her coat pocket for the third time in as many minutes. The folded paper was still there. Interview confirmation. American Public Health Leadership Fellowship. 8 o'clock sharp. She'd worked herself half to death for this chance. Competed against hundreds of applicants. Stayed late, came in early, published papers on her days off. This fellowship only took one person. One. Don't be late, she whispered to herself. Just get on the train. Just get there. The platform came into view down the stairs. She could see the crowd already packed along the yellow safety line waiting. The departure board flickered. Her train, 3 minutes away. If she caught this one, she'd arrive with 5 minutes to spare. 5 minutes to catch her breath, smooth her hair, stop her hands from shaking. Emily didn't look at the people around her. Didn't register the old woman struggling with grocery bags. Didn't notice the teenager with headphones bobbing his head. She only saw the numbers on the board ticking down. 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 45 seconds. Her medical training had taught her to focus under pressure, to block out everything except what mattered. Right now, what mattered was that train. The crowd shifted. Someone bumped her shoulder. She adjusted her bag and kept moving forward. Eyes on the board, hand checking her pocket again. The paper crinkled under her fingers. Still there. Still real. 2 minutes 30 seconds. Then she heard it. A metallic screech, high-pitched wrong, cutting through the low murmur of the station. It came from across the tracks, from the opposite platform. Emily's head turned reflexively, her exhausted brain trying to place the sound. Not a train. Something else, something scraping metal against metal. The screech stopped. For one heartbeat, the station seemed to hold its breath. Then a man's voice shattered the silence. Please somebody help me. The voice was old, cracking with panic. Emily's eyes snapped to the opposite platform. Through the mass of commuters, she could see movement, people stepping back, creating a circle of empty space. In the center of that circle, an elderly man sat in an electric wheelchair at the very edge of the platform. I can't move, please someone. Emily's stomach dropped. The wheelchair. It wasn't moving. One of its front wheels had slipped into the gap between the platform and the tracks, that treacherous space where metal met concrete, where warnings were posted, where you were never supposed to stand. The man was trying to back up. She could see his hands fumbling with the control panel on his armrest, his thin shoulders hunched forward. But the wheelchair stayed locked in place, the wheel wedged tight. Around him, people pulled out their phones. Some pointed. Some filmed. Nobody moved closer. Emily looked at the departure board. 1 minute 50 seconds. She looked back at the old man. He was still struggling, his voice rising higher now. The train's coming. Please, I can't get out. Her interview. The fellowship. One chance. One person chosen. 5 minutes to spare if she left now, got on her train, pretended she hadn't heard, hadn't seen. The man's voice cracked into something close to a sob. Please, Emily's feet were already moving. She didn't decide, didn't weigh options. Her body simply reacted, muscle memory from years of emergency response overriding everything else. She ran for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, her bag bouncing hard against her hip. "Excuse me," coming through, people barely moved. She squeezed between shoulders, pushed past a man in a suit who swore at her. The opposite platform. She had to get to the opposite platform, had to cross to the other side. 1 minute 30 seconds, her lungs burned. The sleepless night caught up with her legs, making them heavy, clumsy. She nearly tripped on the last step, caught herself on the railing, kept running. The old man saw her coming, his eyes pale blue wide with fear, locked onto hers. "Help me," he breathed. "Please, I don't want to die like this." Emily dropped to her knees beside the wheelchair. Up close, she could see how bad it was. The front left wheel had sunk deep into the gap, the rubber tire compressed, the metal rim caught on the edge of the platform. The man was frail, probably in his 80s, his hands trembling on the controls. "It stopped working," he said, voice shaking. "The controls they froze. I can't, it's okay." Emily's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I've got you." She grabbed the back of the wheelchair and pulled. Nothing. The wheel held fast. She tried again, muscles straining, but the chair was heavy, easily 200 pounds with the battery and electronics, and the angle was wrong. 50 seconds. Her hand slipped on the metal frame. She repositioned, bent her knees, tried to lift while pulling backward. The wheelchair rocked slightly but didn't budge. "It's not working." The old man's voice rose to a wail. "Leave me, just go. I'm not leaving you." Emily's jaw clenched. She could feel the platform beginning to vibrate beneath her knees. The train was close now, very close. 30 seconds. Think, she was a doctor. She solved problems. There had to be a way. Emily released the handles and moved to the front of the wheelchair, the stuck wheel. If she could just tilt the chair back, lift the front wheels off the ground. She reached under the footrest, fingers scrabbling for purchase on the metal frame. The old man was saying something, but she couldn't hear him over the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. 15 seconds. She heaved upward with everything she had. The front of the wheelchair lifted, 1 inch, 2 inches, the stuck wheel scraped against the platform edge but didn't come free. "Come on." Emily's voice was a growl. She adjusted her grip, felt something sharp dig into her palm, ignored it. 10 seconds. The vibration became a rumble. Somewhere down the tunnel, she could see lights, twin circles of white growing larger. 5 seconds. Emily locked the rear wheels with her foot, gripped the frame with both hands and threw her entire body weight backward. The wheelchair tilted, teetered, the stuck wheel made a horrible grinding sound and popped free. The momentum sent Emily stumbling backward. She fell hard on her hip, still clutching the wheelchair handles, dragging the old man with her. They rolled away from the edge just as the train burst from the tunnel, a wall of metal and wind and screaming brakes. Emily didn't stop. She kept pulling, scrambling backward on the concrete, until they were 3 feet from the edge, 4 feet. Then she let go and collapsed onto her back, chest heaving. The train screeched to a stop, where they'd been seconds before. Doors hissed open. Passengers began to exit and board, most of them barely glancing at the woman lying on the platform beside an old man in a wheelchair. Emily closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to press them against the cold concrete to make them stop. She'd done it. He was safe, and she just missed her train. Emily lay on the platform for perhaps 5 seconds before her training kicked back in. She pushed herself up to sitting, ignoring the sharp pain in her hip where she'd landed, and turned to check on the old man. He was slumped in his wheelchair, both hands gripping the armrests, his face the color of old paper. His chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow movements. Emily recognized the signs immediately, shock setting in, possibly the beginning of a panic attack. She moved closer, her voice dropping into the calm, measured tone she used with patience. "Sir, I need you to look at me. Can you do that?" His eyes found hers. They were unfocused, glassy. "You're safe now." Emily continued, reaching for his wrist to check his pulse. It hammered under her fingers, fast but steady. "The train is stopped. You're not in danger. I need you to take a slow breath with me. In through your nose," she demonstrated, breathing in deeply. The old man tried to follow, his breath hitching. "Good. Now out through your mouth. Slow." They breathed together 3 times before his pulse began to settle. Color started creeping back into his cheeks. Around them the platform had returned to its usual chaos. People rushing for the train, others streaming out, everyone in their own urgent bubble. "Thank you." The words came out barely above a whisper. "You saved my life. Are you hurt anywhere?" Emily was already doing a visual assessment. No obvious injuries, no blood, but at his age internal bleeding was a concern, and the shock could mask pain. "I don't think so. Just shaken." His hands still trembled on the armrests. "I can't believe, I thought." His voice broke. Emily saw tears gathering in those pale blue eyes. "Hey," she squeezed his shoulder gently. "You're okay, that's what matters. I should have been more careful." The crowd pushed, and I rolled too close, and then the wheel just slipped into that gap, and I panicked. The controls wouldn't respond. I pressed every button but nothing worked. Emily glanced at the control panel on his armrest. The display was dark now. Might have been a short circuit when the wheel got stuck. The system probably has an automatic shutoff. I kept calling for help, but everyone just— He shook his head. "They thought I was faking, making a video." One person actually laughed. The bitterness in his voice made Emily's chest tight. She'd seen the phones held up, recording. She'd heard someone in the crowd say something about a stunt, as she'd been pulling him back. "Well, you're safe now." Emily looked at her watch. A habit, a reflex, and felt her stomach drop. 8:03. The fellowship interview had started 3 minutes ago. Her hands went numb, all the air seemed to leave her lungs at once. That chance she'd worked for, sacrificed for, stayed awake for, it was slipping away with every second she sat here on this filthy platform. She should call. Right now. Explain. Maybe they'd understand. Maybe they'd wait. Maybe miss. The old man was looking at her with concern. "Are you all right? You've gone very pale." Emily forced herself to focus. There were more important things than her career right now, like making sure this man got proper medical attention. "I'm fine, but we need to get you checked out. You experienced a serious trauma. You could be injured and not feel it yet because of the adrenaline." "I really don't think. I'm a doctor." Emily's voice was firm. "And I'm telling you that you need to be examined. Is there anyone I can call for you? Family?" Before he could answer, 2 MTA workers in fluorescent vests appeared, slightly out of breath. "We got a report of an incident," the taller one said, looking between Emily and the elderly man. "Everyone okay here? This gentleman's wheelchair got stuck in the platform gap." Emily explained, standing up on shaky legs. "He's uninjured but should be evaluated for shock. Can you call for medical assistance?" "Already on their way." Someone filmed it and called 911. The worker knelt beside the wheelchair, examining the front wheel. "This could have been real bad, sir. You're lucky this lady was here." "I know." The old man's eyes found Emily's again. "I don't even know your name." Emily Brooks. Walter Hammond." He tried to extend his hand, but it shook too much. He pulled it back with an embarrassed smile. "I'd shake your hand properly, but I don't seem to have full control of my limbs at the moment." Despite everything, Emily found herself smiling back. "That's the shock. It'll pass." Sirens echoed from somewhere above, growing louder. The paramedics would be here soon. They'd take over, get Walter to a hospital, make sure he was truly okay, and Emily could leave, could catch the next train, could call the fellowship committee, apologize, beg for another chance. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with trembling fingers. One new message, from Dr. Michael Levin, chair of the fellowship selection committee. Her thumb hovered over the notification. She couldn't breathe. This was it, the rejection, the apology, the thank you for your interest, but— She opened the message. "Dr. Brooks, we've been informed that today's interview session will need to be rescheduled. One of our committee members has encountered a personal emergency and cannot attend. We will notify all candidates of the new date within 48 hours. Our apologies for the inconvenience." Emily read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. Rescheduled, not cancelled, not rejected, rescheduled. She looked up at the ceiling of the subway station, and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Relief washed over her so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. "Good news?" Walter asked. "Yeah." Emily's voice was rough. "Yeah, actually, very good news." The paramedics arrived then, 2 of them carrying equipment, asking questions in rapid succession. Emily gave them a brief rundown: estimated time of incident, patient's initial presentation, current status. She used medical terminology without thinking, slipping into the professional mode that was second nature. One of the paramedics, a young woman with her hair in a tight bun, gave Emily an appraising look. "Your medical resident, Mount Sinai. Just finished a shift. That explains why he's so calm." The paramedic turned to Walter with a reassuring smile. "You're in good hands, sir. We're going to take you to get checked out. Make sure everything's okay." Walter nodded but kept his eyes on Emily. "Will you? I mean, I'd like to thank you properly, when I'm not such a mess." "You don't need to thank me. I do. I really do." His voice was thick with emotion. "You didn't hesitate. Everyone else just watched, but you didn't even think about it." Emily didn't know what to say to that. She had thought about it, for maybe half a second. She'd thought about her interview, her future, everything she had to lose. But then his voice had overridden all of that, and her body had moved before her brain could catch up. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Hammond," she said quietly. The paramedics began preparing to move him. Emily stepped back, suddenly aware of how many people were staring at her. Phones were still out, still filming. She could see herself in their screens, a small woman in dirty scrubs, hair falling out of its ponytail, a rip in her pants from where she'd fallen. She needed to leave, now, before anyone started asking questions, before anyone recognized her, before this became something bigger than a simple act of helping someone in trouble. Emily grabbed her bag from where she'd dropped it, and headed for the stairs. Her legs felt like rubber. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and a tremor in her hands that wouldn't stop. She made it to the platform for her train, and collapsed onto a bench. The next train would arrive in 7 minutes. She'd go home, sleep for 12 hours, and try to process what had just happened. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from her roommate Jessica. "You're all over Twitter. Woman saves elderly man from oncoming train at Times Square. When were you gonna tell me you're a hero?" Emily's stomach sank. She opened Twitter with dread. The video was everywhere. Multiple angles. Some showed her running across the platform. Others caught the moment she'd pulled the wheelchair back, the train screaming past seconds later. One shot, taken from behind, showed her lying on her back afterward, chest heaving, while commuters stepped around her to board the train. The views were climbing rapidly. Thousands, tens of thousands. Emily closed the app and put her phone in her bag. She didn't want to see it, didn't want to read the comments, the speculations, the inevitable debate about whether what she'd done was brave or reckless. She just wanted to go home. When the train finally arrived, she found a seat in the corner and pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window. Outside, the tunnel walls blurred into darkness. She'd saved a life today. That should feel good. That should feel like enough. So why did she feel so hollow? The apartment was blessedly quiet when Emily finally made it home. Jessica had left a note on the kitchen counter. "At work. Eat something. Love you, hero." Next to a covered plate of scrambled eggs that had long since gone cold. Emily looked at the eggs, at the note, at her hands that still trembled slightly when she held them out. She wasn't hungry. She wasn't anything except tired in a way that went deeper than muscle and bone. She peeled off her scrubs and left them in a pile on the bathroom floor. The shower water ran too hot, but she didn't adjust it, just stood under the spray, until her skin turned pink, and the station smell finally washed away. When she closed her eyes, she could still see Walter Hammond's face, pale with terror, could still hear his voice cracking as he begged for help. Everyone else just watched. Emily turned off the water, and wrapped herself in a towel. Her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar. Dark circles under her eyes, hair plastered to her skull, a bruise blooming purple on her hip where she'd landed. She looked like someone who'd been through something. She looked like those patients who came into the ER after accidents, still processing what had happened to them. Her phone sat on the bathroom counter, screen dark. She'd turned off notifications on the subway ride home, unable to handle the constant buzzing, as more and more people shared the video, tagged her, asked questions. The silence was better, safer, but she couldn't avoid it forever. Emily picked up the phone and opened her messages. 43 new texts. She scrolled past most of them. Friends, acquaintances, people she barely knew from med school, all saying the same thing in different ways. "You're amazing, so brave. I can't believe you did that." One message stood out. From Dr. Sarah, The attending who'd supervised her shift last night saw the video. "Proud of you, take tomorrow off, you've earned it." Emily's throat tightened. She typed back a simple thank you and set the phone down again. Tomorrow off, a gift she couldn't afford to accept, not with the fellowship interview rescheduled and a dozen other commitments piling up, but maybe just this once, she could let herself rest. She climbed into bed without bothering to get dressed, pulling the comforter up to her chin. Outside her window, the city hummed with afternoon traffic. Inside, the quiet pressed against her ears. Sleep should have come easily. She'd been awake for nearly 40 hours. Her body was screaming for rest, but every time she closed her eyes, she was back on that platform, pulling at the wheelchair, feeling it refuse to budge, watching the train lights grow closer. What if she hadn't been strong enough? What if the wheel had stayed stuck? What if Emily's eyes snapped open? She stared at the ceiling, counting her breaths the way she'd taught Walter to do. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow and steady. Eventually exhaustion won. She drifted into a restless sleep filled with metal screeching and strangers' faces turning away. She woke to darkness and the sound of her phone ringing. Emily fumbled for it on the nightstand, squinting at the screen. Unknown number. She almost declined, but something made her answer. "Hello, Dr. Brooks." The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "This is Dr. Michael Levin. I'm calling from the American Public Health Leadership Fellowship Committee." Emily sat up so fast her head spun. She glanced at the clock, 8:47 p.m. She'd slept for nearly 6 hours. "Dr. Levin." "Yes, hello." She tried to sound alert, coherent, professional, not like someone who'd just woken up. "I apologize for calling so late. I wanted to reach you personally to discuss something rather urgent." Emily's stomach clenched. This was it. They'd seen the video, decided she was reckless, decided someone who'd risked their life for a stranger wasn't the kind of doctor they wanted representing their program. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'm not sure you do." There was a pause. "Dr. Brooks, we'd like to invite you to a special meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Our full committee will be present. We have something important to discuss regarding your application." "A meeting? But I thought the interview was rescheduled." "This is separate from the standard interview process. I'm afraid I can't say more over the phone. Can you make yourself available tomorrow morning?" Emily's mind raced. A special meeting, the full committee. This was either very good or very bad, and she had no way of knowing which. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I can be there." "Excellent. Someone will email you the details within the hour." "Thank you, Dr. Brooks. We'll see you tomorrow." He hung up before she could respond. Emily sat in the dark, phone still pressed to her ear, trying to process what had just happened. A special meeting, important to discuss. Can't say more over the phone. Her chest felt tight. She'd spent months preparing for this fellowship, crafting her application, rehearsing interview answers. Now everything had changed in the span of a few minutes on a subway platform, and she had no idea what came next. The email arrived exactly as promised. Meeting at 10 a.m. Address of a building near Columbia University. No other details. Emily read it 3 times, searching for clues in the formal language. She found none. She got out of bed and turned on the lights. Sleep was impossible now. Her mind was spinning too fast, running through scenarios, preparing for questions she couldn't anticipate. She didn't know. All she knew was that tomorrow she'd find out. Emily arrived at the building on 116th Street 15 minutes early, dressed in the navy suit she'd bought specifically for the fellowship interview. The jacket felt too tight across her shoulders, or maybe that was just anxiety making it hard to breathe properly. The lobby was all marble and chrome, intimidatingly professional. A security guard directed her to the 7th floor. She took the elevator alone, watching the numbers climb, trying to remember the breathing techniques she'd learned in medical school for managing stress. They didn't work. The elevator doors opened onto a quiet hallway, cream-colored walls, framed photographs of distinguished-looking people Emily didn't recognize. At the end of the hall, a frosted glass door with brass letters, American Public Health Leadership Fellowship. Emily checked her watch. 9:58, perfect timing, early enough to show respect, late enough to not seem desperate. She pushed open the door. The reception area was smaller than she'd expected. A young man sat behind a desk, typing on a computer. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "Dr. Brooks, yes, they're ready for you. Conference room B, just through there." He pointed to a door on the left. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. "Thank you." She walked to the door, smoothed down her jacket one more time, and knocked. "Come in." The conference room was long and narrow, dominated by a polished wooden table. 5 people sat on one side. Emily recognized Dr. Michael Levin from his photo on the fellowship website, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The others were strangers, except for the man at the end of the table. Emily's breath caught. Walter Hammond sat in his wheelchair, hands folded calmly in his lap, looking at her with those same pale blue eyes, but now he was different, composed, alert, dressed in a pressed shirt and tie, nothing like the terrified old man from the subway platform. "Dr. Brooks." Dr. Levin stood and extended his hand. "Thank you for coming on short notice. Please have a seat." Emily shook his hand automatically, her mind still trying to process what she was seeing. She moved to the chair across from the committee, her eyes never leaving Walter. He smiled at her, a small, knowing smile that made her stomach flip. "I believe you've already met Professor Hammond," Dr. Levin said, settling back into his chair, though perhaps not under the best circumstances. Emily found her voice. "Professor Hammond, Walter Hammond." The old man's voice was steady now, nothing like the broken panic from yesterday. "I teach at Columbia Medical School, or rather I used to, before retirement. Now I mostly consult and serve on various committees." He paused, "including this one." The room tilted slightly. Emily gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. You're on the fellowship committee." "I am." Walter's smile widened. "In fact, I was the emergency that caused yesterday's postponement. I was supposed to be at your interview, but instead I was in the hospital getting checked for injuries I thankfully didn't have." Emily couldn't speak, couldn't think. The man she'd saved, the random stranger she'd pulled from the platform gap, was a professor, was on the committee, was sitting here right now, looking at her like what? Dr. Levin cleared his throat. "Dr. Brooks, I'm sure you're confused. Let me explain. Professor Hammond contacted me yesterday afternoon from the hospital. He told me what happened at the subway station. He told me it was you who saved his life. I didn't know who he was." "We know." This came from a woman sitting next to Dr. Levin, perhaps 40 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a bun. "We've reviewed the footage, multiple angles. You can clearly be seen running from the opposite platform, without hesitation, no recognition, no pause. You just acted." Emily's hands were shaking again. She pressed them flat against her thighs under the table. "I'm sorry, I don't understand what this meeting is about." Walter leaned forward slightly. "It's about you, Dr. Brooks, what you did, why you did it." "I did it because someone needed help. You did it at significant risk to yourself," the woman continued. "You had no protective equipment, no backup, no guarantee you could move the wheelchair in time. You could have been killed." "I didn't really think about that." "No," Walter said quietly. "You didn't. That's the point." Dr. Levin opened a folder in front of him. "Your application for the fellowship is remarkable, Dr. Brooks. Top grades, strong recommendations, published research despite being only in your 2nd year of residency. You're exactly the kind of candidate we look for." Emily waited for the but Dr. Levin continued. "This committee doesn't just evaluate academic achievement. We're looking for leaders in public health, people who will make difficult decisions under pressure, people who understand that medicine isn't just about science, it's about service." He closed the folder and looked directly at Emily. "Professor Hammond has been on this committee for 12 years. In all that time, I've never seen him advocate for a candidate the way he advocated for you yesterday. He called me from his hospital bed. Dr. Brooks said he'd found exactly the kind of doctor this fellowship was created to support." Emily's throat was so tight she could barely swallow. I was just doing what any doctor would do." "No," Walter's voice was firm. "Most doctors would have called for help and waited. Most people would have filmed it on their phones, just like everyone else on that platform. You didn't wait, you didn't film, you acted." The woman with dark hair spoke again. "There's a word for what you demonstrated, Dr. Brooks. Moral courage. The willingness to do what's right even when it costs you something. even when it might cost you everything. Emily thought of her interview, of the minutes ticking away while she pulled at that wheelchair, of the choice she'd made without really making it. I almost didn't, she heard herself say. For a second I thought about my interview, about missing it, about everything I'd worked for. But you didn't let that stop you, Walter said. No, I couldn't. Because if I had just walked away, if I had let you. Emily stopped, unable to finish the sentence. I wouldn't have been able to live with myself. I wouldn't have deserved to be a doctor anymore. The room fell silent. The committee members exchanged glances. Dr. Levin made a note in his folder. Finally, Walter spoke. Do you know what I do, Dr. Brooks? What I did before I retired? No, sir. I was a trauma surgeon. 30 years in the field, most of them in military hospitals. I've seen the best and worst of what people can do to each other. I've seen doctors work miracles under impossible conditions. And I've seen others freeze when it mattered most. He paused. I've spent my retirement trying to identify what separates the two. What makes some people run toward danger while others run away. It's not training. It's not intelligence. It's something else. Something harder to measure. Character. The dark-haired woman said. Yes. Character. Walter's eyes never left Emily's face. That's what I saw in you yesterday, Dr. Brooks. Not just skill or knowledge. Character. Emily felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back, refusing to cry in front of these people, refusing to show how deeply their words were cutting into her. Dr. Levin pulled out another paper from his folder. This fellowship is designed to train future leaders in public health policy. We send our fellows to work with the CDC, with international health organizations, with communities facing public health crises. The work is difficult, often thankless. It requires not just expertise but also the courage to make hard choices when lives are at stake. He slid the paper across the table to Emily. We'd like to offer you a position in this year's cohort, Dr. Brooks. If you'll accept it. Emily stared at the paper. Official letterhead. Her name typed at the top. The words seemed to swim in front of her eyes. What about the interview? Consider this your interview. Dr. Levin's expression was kind. We've seen everything we need to see, but there are other candidates. People who've prepared, who've been waiting. There's only one position this year. Walter interrupted gently. There's always only one, and this year, it's yours. If you want it. Emily looked around the table at the faces watching her. These people she didn't know, who had somehow seen something in her that she couldn't see in herself. I want it, she whispered. Then louder, stronger. Yes, I accept. Walter smiled, a real smile this time. Warm and genuine. Good. Because I wasn't sure how I'd repay you for saving my life, but this seemed like a start. You don't owe me anything, Professor. I owe you everything, Dr. Brooks. And so do all the people you're going to help with the training this fellowship provides. You just don't know it yet. The meeting ended shortly after. There were papers to sign, details to discuss, a timeline to review. Emily moved through it all in a daze, her hands only slightly steadier than they'd been at the start. As the committee filed out, Walter remained waiting until they were alone. Can I tell you something? He asked. Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. When I was stuck on that platform, when I realized the train was coming and nobody was going to help me, I thought about my life. Everything I'd done, everyone I'd tried to save. And I thought, what a stupid way to die. What a waste. He looked down at his hands. Then I heard someone running. Heard your voice saying you had me. And I knew I was going to be okay. I'm glad I was there. So am I. Not just because you saved my life, though I'm grateful for that. But because it reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place. Why any of us do this work. He met her eyes. We do it because we can't not do it. Because when we see someone suffering, we can't walk away. That's the covenant we make. Emily thought about that. The covenant. The promise. The unspoken agreement that came with the white coat and the title. To help. To heal. To act when others wouldn't. Thank you, she said. For believing in me. Walter wheeled closer and extended his hand. This time it didn't shake. Emily took it, and they shook properly. Doctor to doctor, survivor to rescuer. No. Walter said. Thank you for reminding me that there are still people like you in this profession. People who remember what it means to care. After he left, Emily sat alone in the conference room for a long moment. The acceptance letter lay on the table in front of her, official and real and hers. She picked it up and held it to her chest, finally letting the tears come. The award ceremony took place 3 weeks later in a hotel ballroom. Emily had only ever seen in movies. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Round tables covered in white linen filled the space, each one set with more silverware than seemed necessary. People in formal wear mingled near the bar, their conversations a low murmur beneath classical music played by a string quartet in the corner. Emily stood just inside the entrance, tugging at the dress Jessica had insisted she buy for the occasion. It was simple, dark blue, appropriate, and completely unlike anything she normally wore. She felt like an imposter. "You look terrified." Jessica appeared at her elbow, resplendent in a silver gown that made her look like she belonged here. "Breathe. You earned this. I saved someone on a subway platform. I didn't cure cancer. You did what nobody else would do. That counts." Jessica pressed a glass of champagne into Emily's hand. "Now stop looking like you're about to run and let people celebrate you." The event was the annual gala for the New York Medical Society, honoring achievements in healthcare across the city. Emily had no idea she was being honored until the invitation arrived 2 weeks ago. The Heart of Humanity Award, it was called. Given to a medical professional who demonstrated exceptional compassion and bravery in service to others. She'd almost declined. The attention made her skin crawl, but Dr. Levin had called personally, explaining that Walter Hammond had nominated her and that refusing would be seen as a slight to him. So here she was, wearing a dress that cost more than her monthly rent, about to accept an award she didn't deserve. Dr. Brooks. A man in his 70s approached, hand extended. "Gerald Morrison, I'm on the board of Mount Sinai. Wanted to congratulate you personally. What you did was extraordinary." Emily shook his hand, mumbled something that might have been thank you, and watched him disappear back into the crowd. This happened 6 more times before dinner was served. Strangers approaching, offering congratulations, telling her how inspiring she was. Each interaction left her more exhausted than the last. Dinner was salmon she barely tasted. Jessica kept up a steady stream of conversation with the people at their table, other doctors, administrators, someone's spouse who worked in finance. Emily smiled and nodded at appropriate moments, but felt separate from it all, like she was watching herself from very far away. Then dessert plates were cleared, and Dr. Levin took the stage. Emily's stomach dropped. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Michael Levin, chair of the American Public Health Leadership Fellowship. Tonight I have the honor of presenting the Heart of Humanity Award to someone who embodies the very best of what it means to be a physician." A screen behind him lit up with a photo, Emily in her scrubs, caught by a photographer as she'd left the subway station that morning. She looked exhausted. Young. Ordinary. 3 weeks ago, Dr. Emily Brooks was on her way to a critical interview when she witnessed an elderly man trapped on a subway platform. A train was approaching. He couldn't move. And while dozens of bystanders watched and filmed, Dr. Brooks ran toward danger without hesitation. The screen changed to show the video. Emily forced herself to watch as her smaller self pulled at the wheelchair, stumbled, pulled again. The train appearing. The last second escape. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Dr. Brooks is a second-year resident in emergency medicine, Dr. Levin continued. She had worked a 36-hour shift with no sleep. She was already late for an interview that could determine the trajectory of her career. She had every reason to call for help and continue on her way. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle, but she didn't. Because Dr. Brooks understands something fundamental about our profession. We don't take the easy path. We don't calculate the personal cost before we act. We see someone suffering, and we help. Period. Emily's hands were shaking in her lap. Jessica reached over and squeezed her wrist gently. "The man Dr. Brooks saved that morning is someone many of you know. Professor Walter Hammond, one of the most respected trauma surgeons of his generation. Walter, would you join me on stage?" Walter rolled out from somewhere near the front, navigating his wheelchair up a ramp to where Dr. Levin stood. He looked distinguished in a dark suit, his white hair combed neatly. Nothing like the panicked old man from the platform. "Thank you, Michael." Walter's voice carried clearly through the sound system. "When Dr. Brooks pulled me from that platform, I didn't know who she was. She didn't know who I was. That's important. She didn't save me because of my title or my reputation. She saved me because I was a human being who needed help." He looked out into the crowd, his eyes finding Emily's. "I've spent 40 years training doctors, teaching them how to cut, how to suture, how to make split-second decisions in the operating room. But I can't teach what Dr. Brooks demonstrated that morning. I can't teach someone to care so deeply that their own safety becomes secondary. I can't teach courage." Emily felt tears beginning to form. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of all these people. What happened on that platform reminded me why I became a doctor. Not for the prestige, or the salary, or the publications. I became a doctor because I wanted to save lives. And when I was the one who needed saving, when my own life hung in the balance, it was someone like me, someone who remembered that fundamental purpose, who was there. Walter wheeled to the side of the stage. "Dr. Emily Brooks, would you come up here please?" The applause started before Emily could move. Jessica nudged her gently. "Go. You've got this." Emily stood on legs that felt like water. She walked to the stage in a dream, aware of hundreds of eyes following her, camera flashes going off. The stairs felt impossibly steep. She climbed them carefully, grateful the dress was long enough to hide her shaking knees. Walter waited at the top, holding a crystal award shaped like a flame. He smiled as she approached. "This is for you," he said quietly, "just for her. Not because you're a hero, but because you're exactly the kind of doctor this world needs." He placed the award in her hands. It was heavier than she expected. The crystal caught the light, throwing rainbow patterns across her dress. "Would you like to say a few words?" Dr. Levin asked, gesturing to the microphone. Emily hadn't prepared anything, hadn't expected to feel this overwhelmed. She looked out at the crowd, all these accomplished people waiting to hear from her, and almost said no. But Walter was watching her with such kindness, such faith, that she found herself stepping up to the microphone. "I don't think of myself as a hero," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Heroes make conscious choices to be brave. What I did wasn't a choice. It was a reflex." She paused, trying to find the right words. "I became a doctor because I wanted to help people. That's what we all say in our medical school applications, right? We want to help. But somewhere between the applications and the reality, it's easy to forget what that really means. It means showing up even when you're exhausted. It means putting someone else's needs before your own comfort. It means not walking away when it would be easier to do so." Emily looked down at the award in her hands. "If I had walked away that morning, if I had chosen my interview over Professor Hammond's life, I could never have lived with myself. Not because I'm particularly noble or brave, but because that choice would have violated everything I believe about what it means to be a doctor, about what it means to be human." Her eyes found Walter's again. "Professor Hammond said I reminded him why he became a doctor. But he reminded me too. He reminded me that every person we treat, every patient we see, is someone's father or mother or child. Someone who matters, someone worth saving, no matter the cost." The applause when she finished was deafening. Emily stepped back from the microphone, overwhelmed, wanting nothing more than to disappear. But Walter caught her hand and raised it high, and the applause grew even louder. Later, after the ceremony ended, and most of the crowd had dispersed, Emily found herself alone with Walter in a quiet corner of the lobby. Her award sat on the table between them, still catching light. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Exhausted, grateful, completely overwhelmed." "That's normal." He smiled. "The attention will die down eventually. But the responsibility won't. Responsibility, you're a role model now, whether you wanted to be or not. People will look to you as an example of what doctors should be. That's both a gift and a burden." Emily thought about that. About the strangers who had approached her all evening, telling her she'd inspired them. About the medical students who'd asked for photos, said they wanted to be like her someday. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Nobody ever is. Walter leaned back in his wheelchair. But you'll learn. That's what the fellowship is for. To teach you how to carry this kind of responsibility without letting it crush you. Did you ever feel like this? After you saved someone? All the time, especially early in my career. He was quiet for a moment. I remember the first time someone died on my table. A young soldier couldn't have been more than 20. I did everything right, but it wasn't enough. Afterward, his mother asked me if he suffered, if he knew he was dying. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. That I didn't know, but I'd done everything I could to help him. And that sometimes our best isn't enough. Walter met her eyes. That's the hardest lesson in medicine. Learning to accept that you can't save everyone, but you still have to try. Emily nodded slowly. And if you stop trying, then you stop being a doctor. You might still have the degree, still wear the coat, but you've lost the thing that made you choose this profession in the first place. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last stragglers leave the ballroom. Finally, Walter spoke again. The fellowship starts in 6 weeks. Are you ready? No. Emily said honestly, but I'll do it anyway. Good answer. He smiled. That's all any of us can do. Show up, do our best, and hope it's enough. Jessica appeared then, Emily's coat draped over her arm. Ready to go. Your carriage awaits, by which I mean the subway. Emily laughed, the first genuine laugh all evening. She stood and carefully picked up her award. Thank you, Professor Hammond, for everything. Thank you, Dr. Brooks, for reminding an old man why he loved this work. As Emily and Jessica walked toward the exit, Emily glanced back once. Walter sat alone in his wheelchair, looking at something on his phone, a small smile on his face. He looked content, peaceful. He looked like a man who'd been given a second chance and knew exactly how valuable that was. Fellowship orientation started on a Monday morning in mid-October. Emily arrived at the program's offices 20 minutes early, still adjusting to the idea that she belonged here. The building was modern glass and steel, nothing like the aging hospital where she'd done her residency. Everything felt different, cleaner. More important, 12 fellows had been selected from across the country. Emily met them over coffee and bagels in a sun-lit conference room, physicians from different specialties, all brilliant, all accomplished. A pediatrician from Seattle who'd developed a new vaccine protocol. An infectious disease specialist who'd worked with Doctors Without Borders in 3 countries. A surgeon who'd pioneered a minimally invasive technique. And Emily who'd pulled a man from a subway platform. You're the one from the video. A tall man with red hair extended his hand. Ryan Cole, internal medicine. I must have watched that clip 20 times. What you did was incredible. Thank you. Emily shook his hand, trying to ignore the familiar discomfort that came with recognition. Seriously, the timing, the quick thinking, I would have frozen. Everyone says they'd help in that situation, but you actually did it. Ryan's enthusiasm seemed genuine. We're lucky to have you in the cohort. Over the next few days, Emily settled into the program's rhythm. Mornings were lectures on public health policy, epidemiology, healthcare economics. Afternoons were workshops, how to design intervention programs, how to communicate with communities in crisis, how to make decisions when every option had costs. It was challenging in a way residency hadn't been. This wasn't about individual patients anymore. It was about populations, about systems, about the kind of large-scale thinking that didn't come naturally to someone trained to focus on the person right in front of her. Ryan sat next to her in most sessions. He asked good questions, took detailed notes, always had insights to contribute. After the first week, they started getting coffee together before lectures. So what made you apply for the fellowship? Ryan asked one morning, stirring sugar into his cup. I wanted to do more than just treat symptoms. I wanted to address root causes. Emily wrapped her hands around her own cup, grateful for the warmth. You. Same, I guess. I got tired of seeing the same patients cycle through the ER with preventable conditions. Diabetes, heart disease, complications from not having access to basic care. He shook his head. Felt like I was putting band-aids on bullet wounds. Emily nodded. She'd felt exactly that way so many times. Plus, Ryan continued, the fellowship looks great on a CV. Opens doors for research positions, policy work, maybe teaching eventually. Something in his tone made Emily glance up. Ryan was smiling, but there was an edge to it she couldn't quite read. What about you? He asked. Planning to go into policy after this? I don't know yet. Maybe. I just want to help people more effectively. Noble. Ryan's smile widened. Though I guess we should expect that from someone willing to risk their life for a stranger. Emily felt herself tense slightly. I wasn't trying to be noble. I was just trying to help. Sure. I'm not criticizing. It's admirable. He paused. Does it ever bother you though, that you got the fellowship because of one dramatic moment instead of years of steady work? The question hit harder than Emily expected. She set down her coffee cup carefully. Professor Hammond recommended me based on you saving his life. I get it. And he should be grateful. You deserve recognition for what you did. Ryan leaned back in his chair. I'm just saying there were a lot of qualified candidates. People who'd published research, led programs, done years of groundwork. But you had the video. The dramatic rescue. The human interest story. Emily's chest felt tight. Are you saying I didn't earn this position? No. I'm saying you earned it differently than the rest of us. Nothing wrong with that. Ryan checked his watch and stood. Anyway, lecture starts in 5. See you in there. He left Emily sitting alone with her coffee, his words echoing in her head. You earned it differently. She told herself he was just being honest. Maybe even trying to help her understand how others might perceive her selection. But something about the conversation felt off, like there was a message hidden underneath his friendly tone. Emily pushed the thought away. She was being paranoid. Ryan was a colleague, maybe even a friend. He'd been nothing but supportive since orientation began. The lectures that day focused on ethical decision-making in public health crises, how to allocate limited resources, how to communicate when there were no good options, when to push for individual rights versus collective safety. Ryan participated actively, raising hypotheticals, challenging the instructor's examples. Emily found herself watching him more than she probably should have, trying to figure out if there was an edge to his questions, or if she was reading too much into everything. After the session, he approached her again. Hey, about this morning. I hope I didn't upset you. I wasn't trying to diminish what you did. It's fine. Really, because you seemed tense, and I'd hate to think. Ryan, it's fine. You were just being honest. He smiled with what looked like relief. Okay. Good, because I actually wanted to ask you something. We've got that presentation coming up next week, the ethical case study. Want to work on it together. I think our perspectives would complement each other well. Emily hesitated. Something still felt off about him, but she couldn't pinpoint what. And refusing would seem petty. Sure. That sounds good. Great. How about tomorrow after lectures? We can grab a study room, brainstorm together. They met the next day in a small conference room on the 3rd floor. Ryan had already pulled up their assignment, a case study about triage decisions during a mass casualty event. So the central question is about resource allocation, Ryan said, pulling out his laptop. Limited supplies, overwhelming need. How do you decide who gets treatment? Emily leaned forward to read the scenario. You prioritize those with the best chance of survival. That's standard triage protocol. Right. But what about long-term impact? If one victim is a 30-year-old teacher and another is a 70-year-old retiree, both with similar injuries, do you factor age into the decision? No. You can't put a value on human life like that. But you're already making value judgments by choosing who to treat first. Age is just another variable. Ryan was watching her carefully. What would you have done on that platform if there had been two people stuck? An old man and a young child. Emily's stomach twisted. That's not the same situation, isn't it? You had limited time. One train approaching. If there had been two people, you would have had to choose. I would have tried to save both, and probably died in the process. Ryan's voice was gentle, almost kind. That's the problem with instinct, Emily. It doesn't account for consequences. Emily stood abruptly. I need some air. Wait, I'm sorry, I pushed too hard. Ryan stood too, looking genuinely apologetic. I do that sometimes, get too caught up in the theoretical. We don't have to use your experience as an example. It's not theoretical to me. It was real. He was real. I know. And what you did was brave. Ryan paused. Maybe too brave. That's all I'm saying. Sometimes the heroic choice isn't the smart choice. Emily grabbed her bag. I'll work on the presentation on my own. Emily, come on. Don't. But she was already leaving. Her hands shaking with anger or anxiety or something she couldn't name. Behind her she heard Ryan sigh heavily. She took the stairs down instead of the elevator, needing the physical exertion to burn off the emotions churning in her chest. What the hell was Ryan's problem? Why did he keep circling back to the subway incident, picking at it, analyzing it like it was just an academic exercise? Emily emerged onto the street and started walking. No destination in mind. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and car exhaust. She walked for blocks, trying to calm down. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. I'm sorry, that was inappropriate. Let me make it up to you. I'll put together a draft of the presentation and send it your way for edits. Peace offering. Emily stared at the message. Maybe she was overreacting. Ryan was intense, maybe socially awkward, but not malicious, and he was apologizing. She typed back. Okay. Thanks. His response came immediately. Great. I'll have something to you by tomorrow. And Emily, for what it's worth, I do think you're an asset to this program. I just want to make sure you're prepared for the scrutiny that comes with being in the spotlight. Emily put her phone away without responding. The scrutiny. The spotlight. The constant reminder that she hadn't earned this position through conventional means. Maybe Ryan was right. Maybe she did need to be more careful, more thoughtful, more aware of how her actions would be perceived. Or maybe, and this thought made her deeply uncomfortable, maybe Ryan was threatened by her presence, by the attention she'd received, the recognition, the fact that Professor Hammond had personally advocated for her. Emily pushed that thought away too. She was being paranoid again, seeing competition where there was only concern. She turned toward the subway station, ready to go home. Tomorrow she'd apologize to Ryan for being oversensitive. They'd work together on the presentation. Everything would be fine. She had no idea how wrong she was. Ryan sent the presentation draft 2 days later, a comprehensive analysis of ethical triage principles with detailed citations and case examples. It was good, really good. Better than Emily could have produced on her own. She made minor edits, and sent it back with a thank you note. Ryan responded with a thumbs up emoji. The presentation itself went well. They stood together in front of their cohort, trading off sections smoothly, fielding questions with complimentary answers. The instructors nodded approvingly. Several classmates came up afterward to congratulate them. You two work well together, one said. Emily smiled and agreed, trying to ignore the small voice in her head that said something was off. Over the next few weeks, Ryan became a fixture in her fellowship experience. He saved her a seat at lectures, invited her to study groups, offered to review her papers before submission. You're good at the practical stuff, he said one afternoon as they left class together. The real-world application. But some of the theoretical frameworks can be tricky. Happy to help if you need it. Emily bristled slightly at the implication that she needed help, but Ryan's tone was friendly.
supportive. She was probably reading too much into it again. Thanks. I might take you up on that. Any time. That's what colleagues are for, right? He paused at the building entrance. Hey, you got any plans tonight? Few of us are grabbing dinner if you want to come. I actually have a shift at the hospital, trying to keep up with my residency requirements. Right, of course, the double duty. That must be exhausting. It is, Emily admitted. But I don't want to fall behind. No one could accuse you of that. You're probably the most dedicated person in the program. Ryan's smile was warm. Anyway, rain check on dinner. Take care of yourself, okay? He walked away before Emily could respond, joining a group of fellows heading toward the subway. The train arrived. Emily boarded and found a seat. As the train pulled away from the station, she closed her eyes and let herself rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new patients, new opportunities to help or fail, or try again. But tonight, she could just be Emily Brooks, a doctor who'd done her best, made mistakes, been betrayed, been defended, and somehow ended up exactly where she was supposed to be. The train carried her toward home, toward Jessica and pizza and whatever came next. Emily opened her eyes and watched the tunnel walls blur past, thinking about Walter's parting words. Being useful instead of impressive, helping instead of achieving, just being who you are, and letting that be enough. For the first time in a very long time, Emily felt like that might actually be possible. She smiled to herself and settled back in her seat, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring.
Emily watched them go, that uneasy feeling settling in her chest again. Why did every compliment from Ryan feel like it had a hook buried in it? Was she being unfair to him, or was her instinct trying to tell her something? She pushed the thoughts aside and headed to the hospital for her shift. The ER was slammed that night. 3 car accidents, 2 heart attacks and a steady stream of less urgent cases. Emily fell into the familiar rhythm gratefully. This she understood. Individual patients, immediate needs, clear decisions, no theoretical frameworks or ethical debates, just medicine. She was suturing a laceration on a teenager's hand when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it until the patient was bandaged and discharged, then checked her messages. Unknown number. Is this Dr. Brooks? Emily frowned and typed back. Yes. Who is this? A friend. Thought you should know people are talking about you in the fellowship program. Not all good things. Watch your back. Emily's stomach dropped. She stared at the screen trying to make sense of the message. Who is this? She typed again. No response. She tried calling the number. It went straight to voicemail. No greeting, just the automated message. Emily showed the text to Jessica later that night. It's probably just drama, Jessica said, reading over Emily's shoulder. Programs like that get competitive. Someone's probably jealous. But why warn me? And why anonymously? Who knows? Maybe someone feels guilty about talking behind your back. Maybe it's someone trying to stir up trouble. Jessica handed the phone back. My advice, ignore it. Don't let some coward with an anonymous number get in your head. Emily tried to take that advice. She deleted the message and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. She kept thinking about Ryan's comments, his questions, the way he always seemed to be analyzing her, measuring her, looking for weaknesses. She told herself she was being paranoid. She told herself right up until the moment everything fell apart. The call came on a Thursday morning. Emily was in a lecture on infectious disease surveillance when her phone vibrated with Dr. Levin's name on the screen. She stepped out into the hallway to answer. Dr. Brooks, I need you to come to my office immediately. His tone made her blood run cold. Is something wrong? We'll discuss it when you arrive. Please come now. He hung up before she could respond. Emily grabbed her bag and walked quickly toward Dr. Levin's office, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she done something wrong? Failed to submit paperwork? Violated some fellowship policy? Dr. Levin's assistant waved her straight through to his inner office. He sat behind his desk with his hands folded, his expression grim. 2 other committee members flanked him, the dark-haired woman from Emily's interview and an older man Emily didn't recognize. Please sit, Dr. Brooks. Emily sat, her heart hammering. We've received some concerning information, Dr. Levin began. An anonymous submission to the Fellowship Ethics Committee, a recording of you discussing the subway incident with what sounds like a colleague. He turned his laptop around so Emily could see the screen. An audio file ready to play. I'm going to play this for you. Please listen carefully. He pressed play. Emily's own voice filled the room. I knew it was dangerous. I knew the train was coming, but I thought if I could just get him back fast enough, the risk was acceptable. Another voice, Ryan's, she realized with growing horror, responded. So you made a calculated decision, accepted the risk consciously. Yeah, I guess. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? Let him die? I'm just trying to understand your decision-making process. For the presentation, how do you distinguish between acceptable risk and recklessness? I don't know if I do. In the moment I just acted. Looking back, maybe it was reckless, but I'd do it again. Even knowing you could have died. Yes, because some things are worth dying for. The recording stopped. Emily sat frozen, replaying the conversation in her head. It had been weeks ago during one of their study sessions. Ryan had been asking about her thought process, and she'd answered honestly, but something was wrong. The questions were there, but the context was missing. Her explanations about evaluating the situation, about how she'd assessed Hammond's position before acting, all of that had been edited out. Dr. Brooks, the dark-haired woman said gently, do you deny that this is your voice? No, but did you make these statements? Yes, but that's not the full conversation. He cut out. What concerns us, Dr. Levin interrupted, is the attitude expressed here. The apparent willingness to take unnecessary risks, the suggestion that you don't distinguish between acceptable risk and recklessness. That's taken out of context. Emily's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. He was asking about the presentation on triage ethics. I was trying to explain my thinking in the moment, not advocating for. Were you aware you were being recorded? The older man asked. Emily's mouth went dry. No, so this was recorded without your knowledge or consent. I guess so. The committee members exchanged glances. Dr. Brooks, Dr. Levin said. I want to be clear, we're not accusing you of anything. But this recording raises questions about your judgment and your understanding of appropriate risk assessment in medical situations. I understand appropriate risk assessment perfectly well. Emily forced herself to breathe slowly. What I did on that platform was dangerous. Yes, but it was also the right thing to do. Professor Hammond would have died if I hadn't acted. No one disputes that, the dark-haired woman said, but the issue isn't what you did, it's how you talk about it. The fellowship is designed to train leaders in public health. We can't have our fellows promoting reckless behavior, even inadvertently. I'm not promoting anything. This recording was edited to make it sound like. Emily stopped, realization hitting her like cold water. Who submitted this? As I said, it was anonymous. But you must have some idea who had access to. Emily stopped again. Only one person had been asking her those questions. Only one person had been recording their conversations. Ryan. I need to speak with Ryan Cole, she said. Dr. Cole. Dr. Levin looked confused. Why? Because he's the one who recorded this. He's the one who edited it and submitted it to you. The committee members exchanged uncertain glances. That's a serious accusation, the older man said. Then let me prove it. The full recording, if it still exists, will show that my comments were part of a larger discussion about ethical decision-making. It will show that I was explaining, not advocating. Dr. Levin's expression was troubled. Dr. Brooks, even if what you're saying is true, even if this was taken out of context, it was. You still made these statements, and they reflect a concerning mindset. Emily wanted to scream, wanted to slam her hands on the desk and demand they listen, really listen. But that would only prove their point about her being impulsive. Instead, she said quietly, what happens now? We're suspending your fellowship pending further investigation, Dr. Levin said. You'll be barred from attending lectures or program activities until we can review this matter fully. The words hit like a physical blow. Emily couldn't breathe. Suspended. For how long? As long as it takes to determine whether you're fit to continue in the program. Emily stood on shaking legs. And what about whoever recorded me without consent? Whoever edited the recording to misrepresent what I said? Do they face any consequences? If we can identify them, yes. But as I said, the submission was anonymous. It was Ryan Cole. Emily's voice was steel now. Check his devices, check his files. You'll find the original recording." She walked out before they could respond, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall until she was outside the building. Once on the street, Emily let herself cry, deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere she didn't know she had. Everything she'd worked for, everything Hammond had believed in, gone because of a carefully edited recording and an anonymous accusation. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called the one person who might understand. Walter Hammond answered on the second ring. "Emily, what's wrong?" Through tears she told him everything. Walter Hammond's office at Columbia Medical School was exactly what Emily expected: floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, framed diplomas, photos of surgical teams from decades past. He sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, listening as Emily recounted the entire story for the second time. She'd cried herself out on the phone earlier. Now she was just numb, her voice flat and mechanical as she described Ryan's questions, the recording, the committee's response. When she finished, Walter was quiet for a long moment. "Do you have any proof that Dr. Cole recorded you?" he finally asked. "No, but who else would have?" He was the only one asking those questions. "That's not proof, Emily, that's suspicion." "I know." Emily slumped in her chair. "But I know it was him. The way he's been acting all semester, the questions, the constant analysis, he's been building a case against me from the beginning." "Why would he do that?" "Because he's threatened by me, because I got the fellowship and he didn't." Emily shook her head. "I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm being paranoid, and the recording really was anonymous and I really did say something inappropriate enough to warrant suspension." "You don't believe that?" "No, but it doesn't matter what I believe if I can't prove it." Walter wheeled around his desk to sit closer to Emily. "Tell me exactly what you said in that conversation." "Everything, not just what was in the recording." Emily closed her eyes, trying to remember. "He was asking about my decision-making on the platform, how I evaluated the risk. I told him that I did assess the situation, checked how stuck the wheelchair was, estimated how much time we had, calculated whether I could get him free fast enough. And that part wasn't in the recording." "No." He cut straight from his question about risk to my response about acting anyway. Made it sound like I just threw myself into danger without thinking. "What else did you say that wasn't included?" Emily thought harder. "I explained that acceptable risk depends on context, that what's reckless in one situation might be necessary in another. That medical professionals make these calculations constantly, when to perform emergency surgery, when to try an experimental treatment, risk versus benefit." And he removed all of that. "Yes." Walter nodded slowly. "Emily, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Did you say that you would do it again, even if you could die?" "Yes, because I meant it. If the same situation happened tomorrow, I would make the same choice. That's not reckless. That's commitment to your oath as a physician." Walter's voice was firm. "But I understand why the committee is concerned. Without context, that statement sounds like you don't value your own life appropriately. So what do I do? How do I prove that I'm not reckless when the only evidence is a recording that makes me sound exactly that way?" "You don't prove you're not reckless, you prove the recording was manipulated with intent to harm you." "And how do I do that without access to Ryan's devices?" Walter smiled slightly. "You let me handle that part." The hearing took place 3 days later in the same conference room where Emily had first met the fellowship committee. This time the entire ethics board was present. 7 people total, all looking at her with varying degrees of skepticism. Emily sat alone on one side of the table. Across from her, Ryan Cole looked calm and professional in a button-down shirt and tie. Dr. Levin called the meeting to order. "We're here to address allegations of misconduct regarding an audio recording submitted to this committee. Dr. Brooks contends that the recording was made without her knowledge and edited to misrepresent her statements. Dr. Cole, you've been asked to appear today because Dr. Brooks has identified you as the source of the recording. Do you wish to make a statement?" Ryan cleared his throat. "I want to be clear that I never intended to hurt Emily. Dr. Brooks, we were colleagues, friends, I thought. If she feels that our conversations were recorded improperly, I apologize. But I did not submit anything to this committee." "You're denying that you recorded Dr. Brooks?" the dark-haired woman asked. I'm denying that I submitted any recording to this committee. Whether recordings exist from our study sessions, Ryan shrugged helplessly. I sometimes record myself reviewing material. It helps me study. If Dr. Brooks was present during some of those recordings, that would have been inadvertent. Emily felt sick. He was lying so smoothly, so convincingly. So you're saying you did record your conversations? Dr. Levin pressed. I'm saying I record myself studying. If others were present and speaking, that would have been captured, yes. And you didn't edit those recordings. I sometimes clip sections for my own review, short segments that helped me understand concepts better. But I never submitted anything to this committee. The board members looked unconvinced but uncertain. Then the door opened. Walter Hammond wheeled in, followed by a woman in her 40s carrying a laptop. My apologies for being late, Walter said. Traffic was worse than expected. This is Dr. Sarah, head of Mount Sinai's IT security. She has some information relevant to this hearing. Dr. Levin looked startled. Professor Hammond, this is an ethics review. I'm not sure, I'm aware what it is, and as the person who nominated Dr. Brooks for this fellowship, I believe I have standing to present evidence in her defense. Walter's voice was polite but brooking no argument. Dr. Chen, please proceed. The IT specialist opened her laptop and connected it to the room's display screen. 3 days ago, Professor Hammond contacted me with concerns about a possible data breach involving fellowship communications. With proper authorization from the fellowship director, I conducted an audit of email and file transfers from program devices. She pulled up a screen showing email headers and metadata. On October 15, an email was sent from a fellowship program computer to an anonymous email service. The email contained an audio file. The sender attempted to obscure their identity by using a public workstation rather than a personal device. However, the workstation requires ID card access, and security cameras captured the person who used it at the exact timestamp of the email. Dr. Sarah pulled up a grainy but clear security photo. Ryan Cole sitting at a computer, his student ID visible on the desk beside the keyboard. The room went completely silent. I was just checking my email, Ryan said quickly. I didn't send. The logs show exactly what was sent from that terminal at that time. Dr. Sarah interrupted. An audio file 3 minutes and 47 seconds long to an anonymous email service that was then used to forward the file to the Fellowship Ethics Committee. She clicked to another screen showing the full email chain. Furthermore, we were able to recover deleted files from that workstation's temporary folder, including the original recording, which is 7 minutes and 12 seconds long. Dr. Sarah played the full recording. Emily heard her own voice again, but this time in complete context. Ryan asking about risk assessment. Emily explaining her thought process in detail, how she'd evaluated Hammond's position, calculated the train's distance, determined she had enough time. The nuanced discussion of acceptable risk that had been completely removed from the edited version. And then at the end, Ryan's voice again. This is great stuff for understanding moral courage under pressure. Really helpful for the ethics presentation. Thanks for being so open about it. The recording ended. Ryan had gone very pale. Dr. Cole, Dr. Levin's voice was cold. Do you wish to revise your earlier statement? Ryan's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. You recorded Dr. Brooks without her knowledge, the dark-haired woman said. You edited that recording to remove crucial context. You submitted it anonymously to this committee with the intent to damage her reputation and standing in the program. Is there anything about that summary that is inaccurate? Ryan found his voice. She got the fellowship because of one lucky moment, one dramatic rescue. Meanwhile, people like me who actually did the work, who built the resume, who earned it, we got passed over. It wasn't fair, so you decided to sabotage her. Walter's voice was quiet but cutting. To destroy her career because you felt slighted. I was trying to show that she's not as perfect as everyone thinks, that she's reckless, that she doesn't deserve to be held up as some kind of hero. Ryan's composure cracked completely. Do you know what it's like, watching everyone fawn over her while I'm right there, just as qualified, just as dedicated? But I don't have a viral video, so I don't matter. Emily stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. This wasn't about her judgment or her capabilities.
This was about jealousy, pure and simple. Dr. Levin stood. Dr. Cole, you are hereby expelled from the fellowship program effective immediately. We will also be filing a formal complaint with your residency program regarding professional misconduct. You have 5 minutes to collect your belongings before security escorts you from the building. Ryan stood shakily. He looked at Emily once, something like regret flickering across his face. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I never wanted it to go this far. But you wanted it to go somewhere, Emily said, finding her voice. You wanted to hurt me, you just didn't want to face consequences for it. Ryan left without another word. After he was gone, Dr. Levin turned to Emily. Dr. Brooks, on behalf of this committee and this program, I apologize. You were subjected to harassment and defamation by someone we allowed into our fellowship. We failed to protect you. You didn't know, Emily said quietly. We should have questioned the recording more thoroughly before taking action. We should have investigated rather than simply suspending you. He paused. Your fellowship status is fully restored, effective immediately. There will be no record of this suspension in your file. Thank you. If there's anything we can do to make this right, there isn't. Just maybe implement better safeguards so this doesn't happen to someone else. The committee members nodded soberly and began filing out. Soon only Emily and Walter remained in the conference room. How did you know to check the security cameras? Emily asked. I didn't know, but I suspected that if Ryan was willing to record you secretly, he'd be careless about covering his tracks. People who think they're clever usually are. Walter smiled slightly. And I happen to know Dr. Sarah very well. She's brilliant at finding digital breadcrumbs. Thank you for believing me, for helping me. I told you before. I owe you my life. Helping clear your name was the least I could do. Walter wheeled closer. But Emily, I need you to understand something. What Ryan did was wrong, unethical and cruel, but the feelings that motivated him, the jealousy, the resentment, the sense of being overshadowed, those are human. They're real. I know. You're going to face more of this. People who question whether you earned your achievements, who assume you got where you are because of that one dramatic moment rather than your capabilities. You'll have to prove yourself over and over. Emily thought about that, about how exhausting it would be, always fighting to be seen as more than just the woman from the video. Can I ask you something? She said. When you nominated me for the fellowship, was it really because of my character, or was it because you felt obligated to help me since I saved your life? Walter considered the question carefully. It was both. I did feel obligated, grateful, more than obligated. But Emily, I've been in medicine for 40 years. I've met thousands of doctors. If I thought you weren't capable of handling this fellowship, if I thought you'd gotten in over your head, my gratitude wouldn't have been enough to make me recommend you. I nominated you because I genuinely believe you have what it takes to be a leader in this field. Even though I'm not the most brilliant or the most accomplished. You know what I've learned. Walter's eyes were kind. The most brilliant doctors aren't always the best doctors. The most accomplished aren't always the most effective. What matters is whether you can see suffering and refuse to look away. Whether you can make hard choices and live with the consequences. Whether you can maintain your humanity in a profession that constantly tests it. He paused. You have those qualities, Emily. That's why I wanted you in this program. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Because when you see someone in trouble, your first instinct is to help, not to calculate the personal cost. That's rare, that's valuable. Emily felt tears threatening again, but this time they were different. Not tears of frustration or fear, but something else. Relief maybe, or validation. I won't let you down, she said. I know you won't, but more importantly, don't let yourself down. Don't let people like Ryan make you question your worth or your place here. You earned this fellowship the moment you ran toward danger instead of away from it. Everything else is just details. 6 months later, Emily stood in front of the fellowship's final symposium audience, presenting her capstone project on improving emergency response systems in underserved communities. Her hands didn't shake, her voice was steady. She fielded questions with confidence, backed up her arguments with data, acknowledged limitations in her research without apologizing for them. When she finished, the applause was genuine and earned, not because she was the woman from the video, but because she'd done good work. Ryan Cole's expulsion had been swift and final. His residency program had placed him on academic probation pending an ethics review. Emily heard through the gossip network that he'd taken a leave of absence, possibly considering a different career path entirely. She felt neither satisfaction nor sympathy about it. He'd made his choices. Now he had to live with them. The fellowship had been everything Dr. Levin promised: challenging, demanding, transformative. Emily had learned to think in systems instead of individual cases, to design interventions that addressed root causes instead of just symptoms. She'd also learned that leadership meant being visible, being scrutinized, being held to a higher standard simply because people were watching. She'd learned to live with that. After the symposium, as people mingled with wine and cheese, Walter Hammond approached her. "Excellent presentation," he said. "Thoughtful analysis, practical applications. You should be proud." "Thank you." Emily smiled. "I had a good teacher. I didn't teach you anything you didn't already know. I just helped you see what was already there." He paused. "What's next for you?" "Back to residency for another year. Then, I'm not sure. Maybe policy work, maybe community medicine. The CDC has been recruiting fellowship graduates. You'd be good at any of those." Walter looked at her thoughtfully. "Can I give you one more piece of advice? For whatever path you choose, of course, don't forget why you started this journey. Not the fellowship, the whole journey into medicine. What made you want to be a doctor in the first place?" Emily thought back to her medical school application, to the essay she'd written about wanting to help people, wanting to make a difference. Generic phrases that everyone wrote, but that she'd meant sincerely, even if she couldn't quite articulate why. "I wanted to help," she said simply. "Then keep doing that. However it looks, wherever it leads you, help people. The rest, the titles, the recognition, the career advancement, that's all secondary. What if helping isn't enough? What if I can't save everyone?" "You can't, you won't, and that will break your heart 1,000 times over." Walter's expression was gentle. "But you'll save some people, and for them it will be everything." Emily thought of that morning on the subway platform. How easily she could have walked away, caught her train, gone to her interview. How differently everything would have turned out. "I've been thinking about that day," she said quietly, "about what would have happened if I hadn't been there, or if I'd hesitated a few seconds longer. But you were there, and you didn't hesitate. But I almost did. For just a moment I thought about leaving. Almost doesn't count. What counts is what you actually did." Walter smiled. "Do you know what I think about from that day? Not the fear or the panic or the close call. I think about looking up and seeing you running toward me when everyone else was backing away. I think about your voice saying, 'I've got you,' like it was the most natural thing in the world. That's what I remember." Emily felt something loosen in her chest, some tension she'd been carrying since that morning. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for believing in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself. You saved my life, Emily. The least I could do was help you understand how extraordinary that was. Not just the physical act, but what it revealed about who you are." They stood together in companionable silence, watching the other fellows celebrate their completion of the program. Walter's phone buzzed. He checked it and smiled. "My daughter's here to pick me up. She worries if I'm out too late." He began maneuvering his wheelchair toward the exit, then paused and looked back at Emily. "You know what the best part of getting older is? What? You stop trying to be impressive and just focus on being useful. It's liberating." He smiled. "I hope you find that kind of freedom someday. The freedom to just be who you are, help who you can, and let that be enough." Emily watched him go, this man she'd saved and who had in turn saved her from her own self-doubt and Ryan's sabotage. She thought about his words, about being useful instead of impressive, about helping being enough. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Congrats on finishing. Pizza to celebrate when you get home." Emily smiled and typed back, "Sounds perfect. Be there soon." As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, one of the other fellows approached, a woman named Sarah who'd been working on tuberculosis prevention. "Hey, I just wanted to say, what you did, standing up against Ryan, not backing down even when the committee doubted you, that took guts. You inspired a lot of us." Emily felt uncomfortable with the praise as always. "I was just defending myself." "No, it was more than that. You showed us what integrity looks like. How to fight for what's right even when it's hard. Sarah paused. I know you probably don't see yourself this way, but you're kind of a role model for a lot of us. After Sarah left, Emily stood alone in the emptying room, processing that conversation. A role model, not because of one dramatic rescue, but because of how she'd handled herself in the aftermath. Because she'd refused to let someone else define her worth. Because she'd stood up for herself without losing her compassion or her principles. Maybe that was what Walter had meant about being useful. Not trying to be perfect or heroic or impressive. Just showing up, doing the work, helping when you could, standing firm when you had to. Emily turned off the lights and locked the door behind her. Tomorrow she'd be back in the emergency room, back to individual patients and immediate crises. But she'd carry this experience with her, the fellowship, the betrayal, the vindication, all of it. It had shaped her, tested her, and somehow she'd come through it stronger. Outside, the spring evening was warm and pleasant. Emily walked toward the subway, the same subway system where this whole journey had begun. She descended the familiar stairs, passed through the turnstile, stood on the platform waiting for her train. Around her, people rushed to catch trains, stared at phones, existed in their own bubbles. Just like they had that morning 6 months ago, just like they always did. Emily looked down at the gap between platform and tracks, that treacherous space that had changed everything. She thought about Walter's wheelchair stuck there, about her own fear and determination, about the split-second decision that had led to all of this. She didn't regret it, not even for a moment.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.